got 7 o'clock. Are we ready to go? Okay. I hereby call to order the regular meeting for August 19th of the Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Tarpon Springs. Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Hasse, Mr. Seaman,
Present.
Mr. Coiner,
Here.
Mr. Stavopoulos,
Here.
Mr. Vesey,
Here.
Ms. McCumber,
Here.
Mr. Petrantoni, Ms. Vigil.
Here.
All right. I understand we have item number 4 has been pulled from the agenda tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We still have item number 3, though, the quasi-judicial announcement, please.
Yes, Chair. I think you're going to go to minutes first.
Oh, sorry. Skipped right over that.
Oh, you're
Okay,
fine.
yes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the minutes as printed.
I would like to make a correction on page 3 and change it to Mr. Seaman, not Ms. Seaman. Page 3.
Page 3.
Otherwise.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I'll second.
So there is a motion, but not a second yet. Would you like to amend your motion to approve minutes as amended?
That's what the motion was, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I seconded.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. Can we have a vote?
Ms. Vigil,
Yes.
McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Vesey,
Yes.
Mr. Stavopoulos,
Yes.
Mr. Coiner,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. All right. Now on to the quasi-judicial.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning and Zoning Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrate that this applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communication or conflicts of interest tonight? Seeing none, if anyone will be speaking tonight, if you think you may speak, please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Sworn.
All right. Then we will skip over item number 4 and go to item number 5. That's application 19-64, a conditional use approval for the operation of a tourist home on property located at 109 South Spring Boulevard in the residential multifamily zoning district. Does the staff have comments?
Yes, this is a conditional use approval for a tourist home in the residential multifamily district at 109 South Spring Boulevard. And this is an existing residence that will be operated as a tourist home. The definition of tourist home is on page 2 of the staff report. The property has the required access and parking in place. And this proposal was reviewed by the city's technical review committee at their July 30th, 2019 meeting and was found to be in compliance with the Land Development Code. This is an area of mixed residential apartments, single family, multifamily type units, and a little bit of a higher density and activity area being in the RM district. And this use is appropriate in that context for this area. It is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. And this property is a contributing altered resource in the historic district, but there is no actual development proposed for the property that would require permits, so there is no impact to the historic district, and it's not on an environmentally sensitive site. The property would be subject to all city codes and ordinances covering noise, nuisances, trash and debris, and so on. It will not require extension of new public services. It's already served by the city and will not adversely affect the growth patterns of the city. So staff is recommending approval of this project of the tourist home with 3 conditions. The property shall remain a single-family residence rented as a single living unit. Number 2, the building shall be maintained with the following: 1 smoke detector in each sleeping area, 1 smoke detector in the common hall between sleeping areas, smoke detectors having 10-year lithium battery style, and a fire extinguisher provided and having annual inspections. And the applicant must obtain a business tax receipt from the city to operate the tourist home. This was properly noticed, and there was 1 emailed comment received today. I believe you have copies of that in support of the project from Kathy Hallett. Are there any questions?
I have a question, and it might be answered at this moment, and it might have to be answered later. And a comment too. I would like to say thank you to the applicant for making the application to operate the home as a tourist home. This question has to do kind of with the technical interpretation of how homes are used for tourist or transient use, and I'm going to drop the word. What's that online home renting site?
Airbnb.
Thank you. I know that this doesn't apply to that, but there certainly are many homes that are being used for Airbnb. Is this application and this process, is this the proper way for someone to be using your home that many are not with, like an Airbnb? And how does a tourist home fit underneath that, guys? Just so I understand this application in reference to other homes that are being used for transient use.
The city's code allows in the let's start with just the conventional Euclidean type zones, not the special area plan. That code allows one way really to do a short-term rental, and that is as a tourist home. That must be a single family residence, and rented for 6 weeks or less would be a short term. So there are, as described in the staff report, there are very few zoning districts that allow tourist homes. Residential office is one, and the multifamily is another one that we have several properties zoned around the city, those 2 zonings, both as conditional uses in those zones. So that is the way that someone can do a short-term rental in the city. The special area plan also allows short-term rentals in several of the transects. So that's very close to downtown. But outside that, it's just basically those 2 zonings, and it has to be a single-family detached dwelling. So does that answer the question?
It does. I think it does. It's kind of a complicated topic. So yes, thank you for your answer. And then if I may, so that means that if there were 100 homes in the boundaries of Tarpon Springs that are listed on Airbnb, technically each and every one of those homes should be designated a tourist home to be operating legally within the city of Tarpon Springs.
Yes. Technically, they would need to be a tourist home.
That answers my question.
Whether the zoning allows it is another question.
Thank you very much.
I just have one comment. I think it's a great idea for the community, but I do have one question regarding the 3 topics that you covered. What if any of those 3 fall into a violation? In other words, they exceed the 6-week time limit or what have you. I mean, what
Okay.
comes from that?
Well, if they exceed the 6-week time limit, they're no longer a short-term rental. This, approving this application doesn't mean the applicant has to operate a short-term rental. It means he can operate one, and he's going to pull a business tax receipt to operate one. So, yeah, if it's more than 6 weeks, he could rent it as a regular residential rental, or he could live in it himself and not rent it at all.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions of staff, we go to public first, right?
The applicant.
The applicant
they're
first,
here.
okay. Is the applicant present? I guess he doesn't want to comment then. Are there any members of the public here that would like to comment?
Ma'am, have you been sworn in? Can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So sworn.
Please approach the microphone and give us your name and address.
Hey, my name is Marty Shannon. I live at 334 Moorings Cove Drive. I'm a board member on the Moorings Cove condominiums, okay, which is across the canal from the proposed vacation rental. Okay, just a couple things to bring in mind. It's been shown, and there's articles on it, that Airbnbs and those type of rentals will decrease the property values in the area. Okay, and because we are right across the canal from that stretch of buildings, and we already have enough issues with property values there, we really don't appreciate having our values decreased any more.
Excuse me, but I think you may be speaking to the item that has been removed from tonight's agenda. This property is not on a canal. It's on
Okay,
a
this
bayou.
isn't on, I forgot.
Yes, the item that was withdrawn prior to this evening's hearing was at
Oh, I'm
327 Manatee Lane. Is that
Okay,
the address
that's it.
that you're?
I'm sorry, I missed it. I missed when I came in
That's
a little bit
okay.
late. Sorry.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I'll just mention to this is the noise value of those vacation rentals. Thank you. Sorry.
That's no problem. Is there anyone else?
If anyone is going to think they may speak tonight, can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So sworn.
Approach the microphone and give us your name and address.
Ben Lacados, 319 West Martin Luther King. I thought I was coming to be here for the one on Manatee Lane, but anyways, I think, whether it's that property or any other, it definitely helps Tarpon Springs. I'm a realtor, so I see all the tourism that's coming in, and I don't see that it hurts property values. If anything, it helps things because it gets people interested in moving to our area. So as a resident, I think it's good, and I live across the canal from that house that on Manatee, and actually I barely even knew that it was Airbnb until I looked it up in the MLS to see what they were renting it for, because there was so little activity there, or as far as noise that people were making from that house.
Sir, would you please repeat your name? Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? In that case, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, Chairman. I motion that application 19-64 is approved as submitted.
I'll second it.
All right. Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Vigil,
Yes.
Ms. McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Vesey,
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos,
Yes.
Mr. Coiner,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. That brings us to application 19-53, which is Land Development Code Amendment, ordinance 2019-18, amendment to Article V, Plan Development Regulations. Does the staff have a report?
Yes. And this is a proposed amendment, sort of a two-part amendment to your plan development regulations section of the code. The first is if you looking at the ordinance, proposed ordinance itself, on page 2 to page 3, you'll see a table that's being struck and removed. That table lists future land use categories along with their floor area ratios, impervious surface ratios, and density. Those items are adopted and updated regularly in your comprehensive plan because they're future land use categories, not zonings. And the city uses the comprehensive plan to enforce those standards. So this table is redundant and it's actually outdated, but rather than updating it, the comprehensive plan rules, and that's what we use for these numbers. So the suggestion, the proposal is to take the table out and replace that section under small a to read that it refers to the comprehensive plan for those standards. The second part concerns waivers in connection with a plan development. The plan development planning tool really is a way to go ahead and look at a project as sort of a master plan. You had one recently. Caliber Collision is an example of one you've looked at recently, where it's a master plan type of approach to a development. Our code, and normally you have flexibility in the standards to allow for placement, different setbacks, different heights, dimensions, driveways, any of that type of thing to be varied in order to achieve some sort of layout that's beneficial. Our code severely limits that flexibility, even though the intent talks about giving that flexibility. So the proposal is to go ahead and provide that by expanding the items that the board can waive for a plan development. And if you go to page 7 of the ordinance, you'll see the change there of a proposal that the board can waive or modify a design requirement of the land development code. And then under capital B, you have the standards by which they have to evaluate that waiver, which they have to live by. So we have criteria for the waivers. The idea is just to expand the waivers to the land development code in order to allow for flexible site design. Are there any questions?
Seeing no questions,
Just have one brief question, please. On the application here on number 6, it says application number 19-53. And over here on our report, it says application 19-81. I'm just a little confused.
Okay, that is an error. So it is application 19-81.
the 8-1 is correct?
Yes. I'm sorry, just a typo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the staff? Seeing none, are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this matter? In that case, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve application 19-81 as written.
I'll second the motion.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Vehil,
Yes.
Ms. McCumber,
Yes.
Mr. Vesey,
Yes.
Mr. Stavropoulos,
Yes.
Mr. Coiner,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes. All right, so application 19-81 passes. And that brings us to staff comments. Do we have any?
No comments this evening.
Do we have any board comments, please? I guess that brings us,
I have a question for staff. Do you have any idea how many tourist homes we have in Tarpon Springs?
No, I don't. That's a good question.
I think,
I don't think we should participate in overloading the market, but
Hmm.
I
There's a
think,
consequence for someone that's running an Airbnb that is not listed as a tourist home?
Yes, if they are cited by code enforcement, then they either have to bring it into compliance. And I will say both of the cases that were to be before you tonight and before you were both cited by code enforcement. Or you have to stop operating the tourist home if it can't be permitted.
One little question that keeps kind of tagging on what I started with. That means that theoretically, there can only be one Airbnb per 1,200 lineal feet and only within those neighborhoods that allow a tourist home,
That's correct.
if it could be enforced to that extent.
That's correct.
I love your answers today. Yes.
working with you, isn't you?
Thank you.
and just out of curiosity also, in just a regular, I guess it'd be an R1 single-family zoning, it's not even available as a conditional use then?
That's correct too. Yeah. None of the single families, R100, R100A, R70A, R60, R70, none of them allow tourist homes.
I think there's a lot of them out there. I've got two in my neighborhood. But anyways, I guess that brings us to adjournment then. If there's nothing else
I so moved. I move
yes,
we adjourn.
yeah, we need to do that, don't we? Okay. Second, anybody?
No one wants to.
Nobody wants to go home?
Oh, second. We have a second there, adjournment? Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Let's go home.
Freaking easy.
I have an envelope of things to be signed that doesn't have anything in it, though.
That's the best kind.